Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I want to dive into this article that the Washington Post published about the women's gender pay gap. And boy, is it a doozy. So, this article makes the claim that women are taking pay cuts as companies mandate return to office. So, they're basically arguing that because a handful of tech companies have called back their workers and told them to work in office. Therefore, that is affecting the entirety of the female population. Their wages are being suppressed as a result. So let's dive in. So it starts with an anecdote from someone who recently made a job shift because of a return to office mandate. But the writer argues such decisions in response to return to office mandates appear to be part of a recent dynamic. After decades of progress and closing the pay gap between men and women, it's now widening. According to recent data from the Census Bureau, with women earning 80.9 cents for every dollar a man earned in 2024. So right off the bat, this is a complete fallacy. For one, this isn't recent data. So the writer chose data from the Census Bureau. So this is a report that was published in September, but it looks at 2024 data. And so if you go down here to female to male earnings ratio, says for full-time year-round workers, and in 2024 it fell to 80.9% from 82.7% in 2023. However, this contradicts data that has been released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This came out in July, and as of July, the median weekly earnings for full-time workers, looking at men's to women's ratio, white women earned 81.1% as much as their male counterparts. Black women earned more, 89.5%. It was Asian women, ironically, who have lost with 77.5%, but it's 81.1%. So right off the bat, this is making the claim that women are earning 80.9 cents for every dollar using 2024 data, when there's 2025 data available from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that says women are earning 81.1 cents. I mean, that's neither here nor there. It's negligible. But the fact that they're making a claim using incorrect data is problematic, because they say it's widening. And if you look at the Bureau, or the Census Bureau, they say, 82, it went from 82.7 to 80.9. That seems substantially larger than if you compare it at 82.7 to 81.1. So if you look at it over time, and if this is correct and you use the BLS data, it went down. It went from 82 to 80, back up to 81. So this really isn't saying anything. It's not saying that wages have dropped for women. It's just saying like things are pretty much flatlined, which is pretty much the case across the rest of the economy. So, of course, this article cites a number of different women academics, and one of the analyses that it links out to is from the Institute for Women's Policy Research, which it calls a nonpartisan think tank. Right off the bat, it's obviously partisan because it's only talking about women's policy. Like, at no point in time in this article is men referenced are male wages or how men work or behavior in the workforce. None of that is ever accounted for. It's just how women are earning less than men and how that fits into the feminist narrative that there's a gender wage gap. So it goes on to say, while economists haven't pinpointed a single driver, researchers see a number of possible factors, including women leaving jobs at the growing number of companies requiring workers to spend more time in offices, fewer affordable childcare options, and the changing makeup of the labor force post-pandemic. So they're arguing that these different reasons account for why women are leaving jobs, and because they're leaving jobs, the overall pay gap is widening. So it validates this claim by saying 3 million finance and tech workers at companies. It looked at 3 million finance and tech company workers at companies that rolled out the return to office mandate, and found that turnover was higher among women than men. And so this gets at the heart of the problem, is how data is used and how it's manipulated to create a specific narrative. So the vast majority of American workers do not work at finance and tech companies. That's just a fact. The vast majority of American workers do not work in these industries. So to take something that is happening at those industries, to analyze data from those industries, and then extrapolate it across the population, is erroneous, because it's applying something that's affecting a small minority of workers and arguing that's happening and affecting everyone. In fact, I looked at, again, looking at Bureau of Labor Statistics data and then also some census data to look and see where the vast majority of men and women work. So, for example, this is occupations with the smallest share of women workers. So you could assume, a lot of these are dominated by men. Similarly, this is most common occupations for women in the labor force, nurses, teachers, that kind of thing. I actually found this table in Data is Beautiful that I think is a far better representation of this. I was hoping that would increase. Okay, never mind. But it's Data is Beautiful, and it talks about the gap. So the top jobs that men work are they're auto mechanics, carpenters, electricians. They work in construction, they're truck drivers, whereas for women, they're secretaries, childcare workers, registered nurses, receptionists, teachers, and maids. So the vast majority of workers in America aren't working in tech or finance. Return to office mandates don't affect these workers. It has nothing to do with their earnings potential, because these are the people who were considered frontline workers during the pandemic, and they were required to go to work regardless. And many of them have to, just based on what they do. I mean, if you're an electrician, like you can't work from home. You have to go to whatever project you're working on, the work site you're at, and you just have to do your job. And that's the nature of it. Okay, so it goes on to suggest that the research suggested women's greater family responsibilities increase their desire for workplace flexibility, and that women are more likely to make the trade-off. Again, this conflates things that might not actually coexist. So this argues that greater family responsibility, so mothers, is an increase in their desire for workplace flexibility. And because of that, women are more likely to make the trade-off where they'll take a pay cut or they'll change a job in order to avoid working in office. I hate to break it to the woman who wrote this, but I think this is the case for most women. I think the vast majority of office workers, hate working in offices. I mean, maybe the tech workers love it because they get all these perks and you got friends and you got free food. Any office I worked at in Washington, D.C. was just absolutely horrendous. It was awful. Just everything from the culture to the type of work I did, just silly things like the architecture of the buildings I was in, where they were located, the lighting. It just wasn't conducive to work, and it just wasn't something I enjoyed. Like, if you want to go to a prison cell for 8+ hours a day and sit in traffic for 2 to 3 hours, like, by all means, you do you. Regardless of whether or not you have children, I think a lot of workers hate that. And I think a lot of men do it because they have kids, and that's not acknowledged here. I think women, regardless of whether or not they have kids, would much rather work remotely and work from wherever they want. Whereas a lot of, I'd say, men, especially fathers, who are working and going to office and doing the whole return to office thing, I think they're grinning and baring their teeth, and they're just going through because they know serving their families is more important to them. And I say this because I worked with, and when I worked for the Department of Defense in Washington, D.C., I worked in Northern Virginia at a military base, and I was shocked at the amount of people who commuted. I had a guy on my team who commuted from Pennsylvania. So he would drive, I think, it was like the southern part of Pennsylvania, but he would drive 4 to 5 hours each way. He only came in, to be fair, he only came in the office I think 2 times a week. So there was some flexibility there, and I think he stayed overnight, but still, commuted in from Pennsylvania. There was another guy I worked with who took the train in from Richmond every day, so that, probably a 2-hour commute. A lot of people lived in the Virginia suburbs, so they were, coming in from an hour and a half, Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, 2 hours on the road every day each way. A completely separate job I worked with, a different contract, a woman took the train in from Philadelphia. So there are people who commute long distances, and I think if they have a choice to not do that, they're not going to. They're going to choose remote, and I don't think it's only incumbent on women to make the sacrifice. I think men are making sacrifices by just going through that kind of commute. But then if they have the option, to work remotely, I think a lot of people would just choose it. I think that's a no-brainer. Okay, so again, it says the share of Fortune 100 companies requiring workers to be in office full-time nearly doubled from the third quarter of 2023 to the present, from 16% to 29%. Again, I'll refer to you to this data is beautiful graph. What percent of workers on this represented here work at Fortune 100 companies? Like, not auto mechanics, not carpenters, not truck drivers, not registered nurses, not teachers' assistants, not maids, not secretaries. The vast majority of people don't work at Fortune 100 companies. So they're taking something that affects a small group of people within, just broadly speaking, within the labor force, a small group of people, and extrapolating it to try to make the case that because of return to work mandates, women have had to make professional sacrifices, taking job cuts, and as a result, that is impacting their ability to earn a wage, and that is reducing the gender pay gap. Okay. It goes on to talk about how certain companies are enforcing these mechanisms. So CEOs such as Amazon's Andy Jassy have framed mandates as a necessary step to strengthening connections and boosting innovation. Okay, this is all BS. Like, I hope everyone knows this. The whole point of the return to office mandates is to force attrition. It's to get people to voluntarily leave in a way where you don't have to pay severance and you don't have to pay them out anything. Like, they're voluntarily separating with the company on their own terms. And they're trying to do that, one, because they overhired during COVID in the early 2020s, but also, two, because AI is coming and they want to get people off their books as quickly as possible. So I think it's silly, not silly, but a little tongue-in-cheek that this author is citing Andy Jassy, because back in June, he basically said in no uncertain terms, unless you all become AI literate, like, AI is coming for your jobs, and we are going to do whatever it takes here at Amazon to reduce our headcount and our workforce footprint in order to improve how we serve our customers. And so they're doing this in a number of ways, right? They're going through corporate layoffs, especially in management level positions. They're replacing warehouse workers with robots. I think if they haven't reached already, they're approaching their 1 millionth robot. So that's pretty significant. And of course, they've still been piloting and experimenting with drone delivery. So eventually they'll, have automated delivery solutions as well. So Amazon's at the forefront of technological change in the workforce. So to say that women are facing setbacks in how much they make because an employer like Andy Jassy is telling them to come back to work, and the whole reason why he's telling them to come back to office is as part of this bigger, broader technological transition to reduce the headcount overall, is just, it just conflates too much, and it doesn't serve the argument well that feminists are trying to make. Okay, so the article then continues with the motherhood penalty, which argues that women are penalized for having jobs, especially when they become mothers. But this is an interesting point that I picked up on here. So this is a gap between men's and women's earnings has long persisted in the United States, but it narrowed steadily for decades after the 1960s as many more women joined the labor force thanks to rising educational attainment. So this is making the case, okay, women started going to college, women entered the workforce, women got all these jobs, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. If that is the case, if women have attained so much, why are the majority of women working in these jobs that don't require a college degree? You don't need a college degree to be a secretary. You don't need to have a college degree to work at a daycare center. You definitely don't need a college degree to become a maid. So I think that's kind of like the elephant in the room, if you will. But this is always something they highlight. Well, it's like women have gained so much. Women go to college. Women do this. Women do that. Okay, but that to this day still hasn't translated and improvement. And so this kind of really begins to underlie the luxury beliefs that are permeating all of this. It's really only affecting women in working for elite companies or top companies, Fortune 100 companies, tech companies, in finance. So it's affecting high-earning women. So the return to office mandate is a penalty for high-earning women. It's a penalty for women who have college degrees, which still the vast majority of women don't. And oh, by the way, the vast majority of men don't either. It's not just women. Like, the vast majority of men are, truck drivers and construction workers. A lot of them are working in blue-collar jobs. The vast majority of people in this country are working-class people. They're not, college-educated elites. So you see that here, but then it goes into childcare, and this is really where you start seeing a lot of the luxury beliefs come out. So it says, childcare remains a persistent barrier to progress for women's pay. When childcare needs increase, it's generally women who pick up the slack, despite a toll on their careers, research shows, and what is often referred to as the motherhood penalty. And I think this is really telling because, yes, when you have kids, the amount of time you can dedicate to a job changes. So whereas maybe when you are 25, you could afford to be an investment banker at JP Morgan and work 80 to 100 hour work weeks in New York City. Sure. When you're, 32, 33, you have a kid or two, like you can't do that anymore. There's new demands on your time. You have to take care of your kids, like physically and mentally, like you're just not as sharp as you were in your early and mid 20s. So there's just limitations on what you can and can't do. And that's the nature of life and growing up. But I think it's a complete misnomer that it's a penalty on that motherhood is a penalty, because this looks at the quantity of time worked, not the quality of time worked. So yeah, women might not have control over how many hours they can work in a job, and that can affect a woman who is trying to climb the career ladder in a corporate 9-to-5, but it doesn't affect the quantity or the value, the quality of the hours that she is working. It does not say that women only have to earn whatever the median pay is. You can elect and choose on your own, even if you're a mother, to work 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week, and double, triple, or quadruple your hourly earnings. Like there's no one stopping you from doing that. And lots of women do that. You can, figure out how to play the system and do it well, and increase your own value. I mean, that's part of the game of this economy. That's part of the game of capitalism. Like that's part of the game of work. It's not just to be a slave for a corporate employer, do as you're told and get the promotions when they let you to. It's to increase the value of your time so you don't actually have to do that anymore. And I think that gets lost here. It's just assumed that, okay, once you have kids, you can't work as much and therefore you're losing out. It completely negates the possibility and the option that you can increase the value of the time you're working, even if it's less. So it argues here that caregiver burdens eat significantly into women's earnings over the course of a lifetime, amounting to roughly $295,000 in lost wages in the form of promotions and retirement savings. This, again, it only highlights women. It doesn't look at men, okay? And so men also there's also burdens associated with manhood. So I'd say, if you want to attribute caregiving as a burden to women, I would say providership is a burden for men. So what percentage of men get to keep 100% of their salary, especially if they're a father and a husband? What percentage of them are keeping 100% of everything they earn? Probably not a lot. A lot of them are paying for, their family's health insurance. They're paying for the mortgage on the home. They're the ones who are fronting the bill for extracurricular activities, kids camps, nights out, all that kind of stuff. If push comes to shove, who's going to be the one buying back to school clothes for the kids? It's not the mom. It's the dad, right? And so you can make the same argument here. So, okay, if women have to defer more of their time to raising kids and caregiver responsibilities, and that reduces the amount of hours they can work and therefore the return on their investment, you can make the same argument with men. Okay, if a man spends, say 50% of his salary every year, making sure the house and the mortgage is paid for, making sure his family has health insurance, and making sure kids have clothes and all their basic needs. If he's losing half his salary to that's half his salary he can't put in his 401k, that he can't invest, and that he can't grow, right? So there's a loss there too. It's not just caregiving burden. It's also, the value of a salary that a man earns that he has to defer to providing for his family. If he had a choice and he didn't have a family, he can invest that. He could grow it. He could become financially independent. But there's a burden imposed on him too. And that goes completely unacknowledged in these types of conversations. So it's only framed as women losing out, but men are losing out too. Both people are losing out. They're just losing out differently. And that's the trade-offs that come with marriage and having kids and growing up and being an adult and a contributing member of society. Okay, so it continues on with childcare and talks about the evaporation of childcare availability. And I think the word evaporation here is quite interesting because it's not so much that childcare isn't available. It's that women in these elite careers, so these culturally, socially elite careers, have electively chosen to move to high cost of living areas away from their organic familial network and their social network that they may have had back in their hometowns. They've moved away from those things, and now they have to go look for childcare elsewhere, and that means competing in the free market for childcare. So it's not that childcare has completely evaporated; it's just more expensive because you're paying someone else to raise your kid. There's of course competition for different childcare centers. You want your kid to go to the best childcare facility, so there's competition, and then you don't have your in-laws that you can call to come and watch your kids. When you want to go on a date night, you have to call a babysitter. So of course, like, things are going to be more expensive, but that's part of the lifestyle you've chosen. If you want to live in New York City, if you want to live in Washington, D.C., if you want to live in L.A. or San Francisco or a major city where things cost more and you don't have your family connections, childcare is going to go up and it's going to become a problem. But that doesn't mean childcare availability completely evaporated. It's that millions of women have made a choice in terms of where they live and the lifestyles they live, and that choice comes with costs. Again, that's part of being an adult. Okay, it cites someone from the National Women's Law Center here and says women are also overrepresented in low-wage jobs, which may have contributed to the widening of the gap in 2023 as many rejoin the workforce. So this woman is a vice president of research at a women's law center, and she's basically saying women are overrepresented in low-wage jobs. Well, has anyone ever asked why that's the case? Why are women overrepresented in low-wage jobs? So I compiled some data. I am going to dive into it after we finish this article, but I just want to call something out here. So if you look at the top jobs that women work, childcare workers is one of the top ones. It is also, of the top jobs, the lowest paying in terms of median hourly salary. So the median hourly salary, or the median hourly earnings of a childcare worker is about $15.41 per hour. So of all of these jobs that are highlighted here, childcare workers are paid the least. So you have a woman here who I'm going to assume is living comfortably in her elite position at the National Women's Law Center. I'm going to say she's probably doing fine. And she is the one, and people like her, people in her socioeconomic class, rely on women to work $15.41 per hour in order to provide childcare for her kids. So it's basically elite women exploiting other women and then trying to call attention to it as if it's unfair and unjust. Like, women like this don't have to pay $15.41 per hour. They're choosing to. Like, they could raise their own children, or they could elect to pay more. They could choose. They could say, you know what? Like, women deserve to be paid fairly. Everyone deserves to be paid a fair wage, because that is one of the talking points that often accompanies feminism. Everyone deserves to be paid a fair wage. So you know what? I'm going to only take my kid to a childcare facility that pays a living wage for its employees, right? But they don't do that. They look at whatever is affordable and available, and then they complain about it. So that's the interesting contradiction here with the luxury beliefs, is you have the very women complaining about the gender pay gap, the very women complaining about the evaporation of childcare are the same women who are exploiting other women who are the ones working in low-wage positions, like childcare workers at daycare facilities, and then using that exploitation to try to argue that there's a widening wage gap. It's just completely insidious the way they do that. Okay. It says the share of working mothers ages 25 to 44 with young children has fallen every month in 2025. So trying to make the argument that this is having a greater impact within the economy. Again, this is comparing apples to oranges. Like, is the share of working mothers ages 25 to 44 with young children falling because they're leaving the workforce? Or is it because of this cohort of women, fewer millennial women are having children in the first place? And so there's a fertility crisis. Like, you can't make these claims and not control for other variables that could account for this. And so this could be women leaving because of the return to work mandates. It could also be because of the fertility crisis. And as millennials age and fall into this demographic, that's going to become more apparent. So a decade ago, we would have been talking about Gen Xers, but now we're talking about women and millennials, because millennials have aged into this 25 to 44-year-old age bracket, and so they're having far less children than Gen Xers. So of course, like that, the population or fertility crisis, that is going to start reflecting in data like this. Okay. And then it closes by saying, similarly, the gender wage gap widening in 2023 and 2024 is likely underpinned by the fact that women with higher levels of education and income have been exiting the workforce. Okay, again, there's myriad reasons for that. Like, some could be leaving because they want to work for themselves. I'm one of those women. Like, I decided, working for a 9-to-5 corporate employer as a wage slave was not for me, was not conducive to the quality of life I wanted to live. So I've spent the past, several years trying to figure out how to make money on my own. It has not been easy. It's been very difficult, but still trying to figure it out. Other people may have gone to start businesses, right? So how many of these women left so they could go start businesses? How many left, sure, to take care of their kids because their priorities changed and that became important to them, right? So this is taking just a broad claim and applying it to the feminist narrative, using it to justify the gender pay gap, when there's all sorts of different variables that could be at play. So this, of course, this whole piece is about the gender pay gap and how it's widening. And I wanted to close this video by absolutely eviscerating this claim, because absolutely not true. So I took data from a couple different sources. So the American Time Use Survey, the 2024 Occupational Employment and Wage Statistics by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, employment status of civilian population data, and then of course the weekly earnings from the second quarter that shows the female to male earnings ratio. And so the problem with the gender pay gap, the problem with this 81% number, is that it compares all women against all men. But even if you don't have a foundation in statistics, if you don't even know how to look at do fancy regressions and look at numbers mathematically, just basic logic will tell you how insane of a claim this is. So it's looking at all women and all men. Well, to begin with, there are fewer women working in the workforce than men. So the vast majority of people in the workforce, there are 154 million workers in the civilian workforce, 85 million of them are men. And so right off the bat, if men earn more, which they do, that is going to skew the number to make it seem like men are earning more, but they're just a larger share of the population. Okay, so then it also says, the median weekly earnings for men is $1,300 compared to women. It's about $1,000. Again, that has to deal with the types of jobs they're working. But if you extrapolate that down onto an average 50-week work week, men are bringing home about $66,000 a year, whereas women just under $54,000. So both are slightly above the median. And so not terrible numbers here, okay? But there's a reason why women are making less than men. Part of it is jobs. Also, part of it is the number of hours per day that they are working. Women work far less than men. It's almost half an hour, so 30 minutes per day, less than men. And if you go to the American Time Use Survey, this is from data from 2024, you can see all of the time and what is spent and how women spend their time. And yeah, sure, on household activities, so things like chores. Women are going to spend a little bit more time than men. Women also spend more time on personal care activities. So 10 hours compared to men at 9.59 hours. That includes sleeping. Women sleep more than men. If you go down here to, other things okay, so was this watching TV? Okay, so men watch TV a little bit more than women. Women are on the phone, taking phone calls and responding to emails more than men. So this just goes to show okay, yeah, women might be spending a little bit more on household activities. I wouldn't say it's substantially more, but they're also spending more time doing other activities too. And that is changing how much time they have available to work and whether or not they're working. I mean, look at purchasing goods and services. The average between the two is 1.69 hours per day. Men spend 1.54 hours purchasing goods. Women 1.83. So if women slept a little bit less, and if they spent a little less time on their personal care, and they spent a little less time on buying things, and they spent a little bit more time working, they might earn, that might close the gender pay gap too. It's not just return to office mandates. It's choice of how you use your time. Time is money after all. So if you're using your time to do things that aren't helping you earn money, there's obviously going to be a gap between those who are using their time wisely and those who aren't. But really the meat of this gets down to the job. So again, I pulled this information from here, looking at the top handful and then the bottom handful here for women, just to see, where they work. And then I went through the Bureau of Labor Statistics, occupation, employment, and wage statistics data. I downloaded this. You can do the same. There's other data within it as well, but it tells you the number of people who are employed in a particular occupation, their hourly median income, and then their annual. And obviously, you go up here to the top, and some of the folks you would expect to be working in those elite luxury positions, financial managers, for example, they're all up here. They're not represented by the average American. So like I said, the average job that guys work, you're looking at mechanics, carpenters, electricians, construction, and truck drivers. There wasn't hourly data or annual data for construction foremen, so I left that out. But on average, if you take all of these median hourly earnings and average them together, the average guy is working more, so working 8.32 hours per day, and is earning $25.73 per hour, and then averaging it on an annual basis about $53,000 a year. So again, it depends on what you do in your job and overtime and then that kind of stuff. But if you're just looking at the top jobs, this isn't including the six-figure salary jobs, working in a corner office somewhere. These are just average jobs for average dudes in the United States that the majority of people work. This is where they're at. Okay, now compare this to women. And this is where things get interesting. So the average secretary is making $22 an hour. Like I said, childcare worker, 15. The outlier here is a registered nurse at 45. A receptionist is making about 18. Teaching assistants, they didn't have an hourly on the OEWS data, but they did have a annual. And then maids are making $16.66. So if you take the average here, the average for women is $23.56, and they're making $46,750 per year. But if you remove registered nurses, let's just cut that out for a second. Okay, if you remove registered nurses from this data set, the median, because they're an outlier here, they make substantially more than these other ones. The average woman in one of these jobs is making about $18 an hour and earning $37,000 a year. So this is the gender pay gap. This is the pay gap right here. Is that women have chosen to work jobs that pay less. There's nothing stopping women from working in any of these jobs. I think in the past there might have been, and then obviously feminists would have had their argument there. There is nothing stopping a woman from going to a tech school, enrolling in an automotive program, learning to be a mechanic. There's nothing stopping a woman from becoming a truck driver. In fact, there's several who post on TikTok about what it's like being a truck driver. There's nothing stopping a woman from going to her local union, whether it's carpentry, being an electrician, plumbing, whatever, and enrolling and going through an apprenticeship program and learning a trade. There's absolutely nothing stopping women as a barrier to entry to do any of those things. Women elect to not do those jobs. Instead, they elect for easier jobs. Jobs that give them more flexibility. So teaching assistants, it's a really easy job for some women who might not have the educational credentials to be a full-fledged teacher, but still gives them the benefit of working a teacher's schedule and having summers off. Receptionists and secretaries, again, there's some flexibility there. Childcare workers. So a lot of it has to do with flexibility as well. But a lot of it is also choice. Like, these women are choosing to work these jobs. And I want to call attention to the lower paying ones here. So childcare workers, receptionists, and maids. These ones, they're earning anywhere from $15 to about $18 an hour. At this point in time, this is a choice. Like, You cannot claim that these women are victims would then continue to work these jobs. And I want to give you a comparison here. So I've been compiling all sorts of data on my own, just looking at jobs here in Austin. And I've noticed a lot of retail jobs pay similar wages and some pay more. So this is a great example. So you don't need any credentials to become a barista. You're just pulling shots on an espresso machine and making drinks and following recipes. I've worked at Starbucks. You're just following recipes, okay? This pays $16.25 to $18.44 an hour. So you can go, still have flexibility, work a part-time job. Starbucks offers awesome benefits. You can get healthcare and, depending on how many hours a week, you can get like educational benefits. So they have a lot of benefits for employers. So if you're looking for a flexible work schedule that pays slightly more than what some of these other women are earning, and you want benefits, like this is a great one to be in. But you can work make 16 to 18 bucks an hour. And then you can work your way up, become a shift supervisor, and then suddenly you're earning $20 to $23 an hour. And there you go. That right there would close the gender pay gap. If the women here at the bottom, where they're overrepresented, if they chose to either work these jobs or within the job field of jobs that are hourly and don't require a college degree, chose to work higher paying jobs, that would close the gender pay gap too. So part of this is choice. Part of this is women are choosing certain jobs to work over others, and that has an impact on the overall economy and the perception that women are earning less than men. But it's absolutely not true that women are earning less than men, because you can't compare. You can't look at this and say, okay, because women are earning $1,000 here and men are earning $1,300 here, and that's 81.1% of men's earnings, therefore there's a gender pay gap. You're not accounting for time, and you're not accounting for the selection of jobs. And then within certain job categories, some of these women aren't seeking out higher paying jobs. I mean, look at registered nurses as an example. So these are all working class jobs. These are all jobs working class people work, okay? Anyone, you can do this. You can go enroll in the class. Same with a trade. You can enroll in the class, get your nursing degree, or work your way up, and you can work your way to making 45 bucks an hour. Like, you could do that. And it's just women choose not to for a whole host of reasons that has absolutely nothing to do with return to work. So this, again, is a complete and utter myth. Women are not taking pay cuts. This is only affecting a small minority of women who work at a small minority of, Fortune 100 companies, and it has nothing to do with the overall income earnings of women across the board. There's a number of other factors that are to play here, and it's myths like this that continue to perpetuate this idea that there's a gender pay gap, and that's absolutely not the case. I think women need to take more responsibility for their career choices, and including the consequences of those choices. And I think women need to acknowledge equal penalties, if you want to call them that affect men as well. It's not just women who take a hit when they become mothers. Fathers step up to the plate and they have responsibilities too. And those go woefully unacknowledged in these conversations. So that's what I have for you today. I really appreciate you for watching. If you found this valuable, I would love it if you would like and subscribe and share it with anyone in your network who might also find it valuable too, especially a nagging feminist who seems to think that there is a gender pay gap. I think once you parse through the data, it's very clear there's not. And other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.